So welcome everyone. Preparation of the start of early voting that starts on February 10th. The Mocs Go Vote Committee has asked City Council candidates to speak with high school and college students in Chattanooga to answer their questions, to share their vision for the future of Chattanooga. So joining us is candidate for District 2, Ms. Jenny Hill. So Ms. Hill, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Chris, and thank you, UTC and the Mayor's Youth Council. This is exciting to get to talk to young people about the why of public service and the what of what we do with our passion. So yeah, my name is Jenny Hill. I am a mom of 2 teenagers. I have a daughter who is 16. She's a junior in high school, and a son who is 13 and in 7th grade. I also am a small business owner. My husband and I started a company together 19 years ago that does web development. Back when we started, we had to convince business owners that the internet was real and that it was going to stick around. So in those 19 years, I'd say we've seen about 50 years of innovation. And that certainly has shaped my perspective on the kind of long-term view that we need to take in a lot of elements of life, not the least of which is the way that we manage our city and our county. I also have been very involved in Chattanooga at large in the nonprofit space for quite some time. When my children were small, about 10 years ago, I had a life-changing experience. I was reading an article about some children who got shot at getting off the school bus. And I lived in Red Bank at the time, and my children were 6 and 3. And my life was pretty tidy. It's pretty straightforward. I had 2 kids, I had a job, I went to church, and I had my happy little home with a screened-in porch. And across the river, there was a mom whose middle schooler got shot at getting off the school bus. He was shot at by 9th graders. And I had this moment where I recognized that her life, that mother's life, was dramatically different than mine, and that no mother should ever have to worry about that. And it set me on a path of asking the question, where do I fit? And what's my role here? And so I started volunteering at a place called MetMen, which is one of our most effective homelessness prevention organizations in town. That led me ultimately, after some participation in things like Leadership Chattanooga, to run for school board. And I serve on the school board and represent District 6, and will actually continue to serve on school board if I'm elected to City Council, because I do feel like public education is immensely important. And now I also have the honor of serving on a group called Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise, C&E board, where for the last year, I've been leading a policy committee where we've been studying affordable housing in healthy neighborhoods to create a framework that we have actually pitched to all the mayoral candidates in hopes that they would make affordable housing a key priority for their administration. So the thing that really was a tipping point for me to decide to run is the work that I have been focused on as a public servant with school board has really been about equity, about the strong belief that I have that your zip code should not determine your trajectory in life. And so what I see is that Chattanooga has built a great deal of energy around human rights. We're starting to recognize as a city that we have cracks. There are those of us who have known for a long time that our city has cracks, but a lot of people, frankly, didn't know. They were blissfully unaware. They were me 10 years ago. And COVID has shown those cracks. And I am fearful that because we are going to have an $8 million hole in our city budget because of the loss of hotel motel tax, that we will actually have politicians who will either truly believe or use it as an excuse that we don't have the money to do that are really important to a lot of people in my district. And so that is why I am running, because I want to make sure that somebody that shares, that is willing to be a voice of people looking for positive change, is on our city council, and I'm prepared to be that person.
Great, thank you. I'll turn it over to you guys for questions.
So I can go first. So I know you mentioned talking about like the cracks in our system, and especially when it comes to like disparities between like classes and different groups of people. So I wanted to know, like, how exactly do you plan to try and sort of close those socioeconomic disparities, especially that we've seen them be really prominent with things like COVID, you know, really highlighting those strong disparities.
So something that I've been surprised to learn is that there are many people who don't feel comfortable acknowledging that that disparity exists. And so first of all, to shine light on it, to speak up, and to press people to have difficult conversations. But then when it comes to programs and policy, one of the biggest challenges that we face as it relates to income inequality in Chattanooga is the reality that 70% of our adults have no credential beyond a high school education. They don't have a commercial driver's license. They don't have a Microsoft Excel widget that they can put, on their computer badge, nothing. And that makes it immensely difficult for those neighbors to make ends meet. And so they find themselves working 2 and 3 jobs. And it's very likely that about 6,000 of the jobs that only require a high school education are actually going to evaporate. They will not be back post-COVID. So a couple of things stand out to me as it relates to program and policy to begin to work to close that gap. And that's a long-term commitment that you have to make. First of all, in the immediate future, Chattanooga needs to do better with workforce training. We invest money in that space now, but our programs have yet to acknowledge the reality of the barriers that people face to getting additional training. So for example, if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, that's because you need every hour's worth of work to pay your rent, to buy food, et cetera. So you can understand how that person would not be able to take time away from work to then go and get additional education. In the past, a few generations back, that workforce training would have been done by an employer. And now that has really been pressed to the education system and more on the individual. So in Chattanooga, for us to act as a funnel to establish programs at Chattanooga State, at our TCAT, which is the Tennessee Applied Center of Technology, those kind of programs to get people funneled to them, but also use some of the dollars we're already investing to remove barriers for people to actually participate. So one possibility is to host some of those classes as able at youth and family development centers. So children are able to be there. You take away the childcare, and you're able to take classes while your children are taken care of. And then to take that a step further, there are some really remarkable partnerships being tested right now in Chattanooga that would also connect that person being educated with a job, with an employer. So kind of leaning back toward that model of generations gone by, so that in fact you may actually be able to be paid while you're being trained. So I think that that's a very important part of beginning to close a gap. Home ownership is another thing that is key for generational wealth. And so carefully thinking about the stock of affordable housing that we have, and keep in mind that affordable housing is something that matters to everybody, because we all have a budget that we live under. Whether you're making $17 an hour or you're making $500 an hour, you have a budget and you need a home that is affordable to you. So we want to take away the stigma that sometimes that word carries, and recognize the fact that we all want to live in the neighborhood in which we want to live, and we should have options for that. And there's many things that I'm going to talk way too much, but there are many things that we can do related to how we produce more stock of affordable housing. And then finally, another thing that I think it's time that Chattanooga choose to become a smart city, to truly be a smart city. Now, I'm not talking about the UTC program that's related to the Smart City Grant, but truly choosing as a city that we want to make education a priority. And I know that we can be a better partner with the schools. I know that we can do better with early childhood education and also with that workforce training.
Great, thanks. Levi, you have a question?
Maddie, do you have one? I feel like you're more eager to share than I am.
I just kind of have a question links with Ibby's question really well. So building off of Ibby question, you mentioned the importance of equity in Chattanooga. And in my mind, equity is intrinsically linked to representation in government, especially in ensuring that the interests of constituents are represented equally. So how do you plan on ensuring that you advocate and include all the perspectives of the Chattanoogans who belong to District 2?
Well, so that work for me starts during the campaign. I have already knocked more than 1,300 doors. And whenever somebody's home, I'm having a conversation with them and asking them about what their priorities are. You know, I tell them a little bit about myself, but more important to me is what matters to them. And we have a lot in common, but also neighborhood by neighborhood, we have some unique challenges. And so making those relationships is super important to me. Also, making sure that over time, I'm bringing those people into the conversation and offering them leadership roles in our city. So I've done that with school board when I would speak up on when I'd speak up on equity, for example. I had parents that would reach out to me and say, I want to talk about how we, you know, what can we do with our curriculum, this and that. And now some of those same people are on my campaign committee because they're having a voice in the way that that I'm serving the public. For me, that kind of making sure people have a representation, it starts with a value, a personal value of equity and of people inherently. Because, you know, we have boards like the development board in Chattanooga that are part of city government. And I challenge myself to look beyond the usual suspects when it's my opportunity as a city council person to nominate someone to be on those boards, because that is a tremendous opportunity for us to get people and voices and communities involved that have historically not felt as heard, and not just felt, have not been heard.
Great. Unfortunately, I think we're almost out of time. Do you want to close with any last minute?
No, let's let Levi ask his question. I've talked plenty about myself.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering really quickly, part of that, you're talking about like jobs and difficulties in getting equity. Part of that I think is efficiency when it comes to public transit. And I was wondering what you were planning on doing, or what solutions pertain to public transit would you bring to the table as a city councilwoman?
So public transit is an interesting chicken and the egg situation in Chattanooga. We do not have a shared priority or value of public education, definitely not in my district. You know, we have people who would like to use it. We have people who will never use it. And at the same time, our system is not very usable. And so we have people who might like to use it, but can't, because we have one bus line in District 2. So I am hopeful and watchful for a catalytic event that would cause the conversation in Chattanooga about public transport to change. If we all have a shared experience that causes us to come to a shared conclusion about the need or lack of need. I mean, I'm open for public transportation. That will help us know the direction we want to go. And an example of like a catalytic event, for example, when everybody had to go home from school and work because of COVID, suddenly we had a very fast switch from the internet is a luxury to the internet is a necessity. And that moment, in the space of 4 months, about 7 years of work was accomplished, where seeds had been planted. And so I don't know what it will be that will cause people to rise up and say, we need more public transportation. But until then, I think we have to focus on incremental improvements. And the first thing that I'd like to see is more bus line accessibility in District 2, and more protection for pedestrians, because we've got folks in District 2 that ride the bus and they have to cross 5 lanes of traffic unprotected to get to the next bus stop. I think it's ridiculous and it's very unsafe.
Right. Okay, great. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, but we appreciate you joining us. And
I'm a long talker. Thanks for asking.